Welcome back to the Changemaker podcast. I'm your host, Deke Copenhaver. Today, my guest, I've been waiting a long time for this one as well, is Linnea Miller. She is a council person for the city of Suwannee, founder and president of Long Table LLC. Linnea is a 3-term council member of the city of Suwannee and has also served 3 terms as mayor pro tempore. Linnea has been a leading figure in creating Suwannee's reputation for being an innovative, inclusive, and vibrant community that's attractive to visitors, families, and businesses. So, I mean, she is definitely a public service. You've got a very long intro there. I do love that you're a graduate of the Knox Municipal Leadership Institute. So Bob Knox is my brother-in-law's cousin, and I knew him from the time I was a little kid. But let's just get into it. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Linnea Miller.
Welcome to the Changemaker podcast, hosted by Deke Copenhaver. Deke is the author of The Changemaker, a Forbes publishing book that has reached #1 on Amazon on multiple occasions and in multiple categories like management skills and total quality management. During this podcast, Deke interviews exceptional change-making leaders. Deke currently operates Copenhaver Consulting, where he helps local governments and other public organizations maximize their potential. He's also a sought-after public speaker. We hope that the Changemaker has an impact on you today and that you find takeaways that make you a better leader in your life. Now, here's Deke.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Deke. I'm so excited to be with you and to have this conversation and just see where it takes us.
Yeah. Well, after the first time we spoke, I'm like, it's not going to be difficult we probably could talk for hours and hours, and hopefully you'll be a repeat guest, and we will. But I just we talked, when last we spoke, talked about what really got you interested in public service. So I'd love for you to tell that story, because one of the things I'm trying to do on the show, these days, politics has such a bad name. But I was fortunate to serve on the board of the Georgia Municipal Association for 9 years. I believe you have as well. Yes. And there really are people like yourself that are focused on being a true public servant.
Yeah. And I love that you say that, because I think, we like to put labels on things. This is kind of a larger topic. We can use language and put labels on it, and that allows different folks to co-opt language that can create confusion and frustration and, help, create a lot of mistrust. And at the end of the day, as elected officials, I think we are public servants is what we are, right? That's our goal. And that should be the approach. And so for me, my journey into this was really an extension just of public service. So I have been in the city of Suwannee, originally from Grand Rapids, Michigan, but I've been in the city of Suwannee since 1998. And I was just so fortunate to land in a community that was, at the time, it was a lot of change was happening in the community. The city was kind of changing from being your typical suburban, metro Atlanta suburban city to experiencing, to being one of the fastest growing cities in Gwinnett County, which is one of the fastest growing communities in the country. And, Gwinnett County, when I moved here, was probably around 200 to 300,000 people. We are now at over 1 million people. Wow. 26 years later, right? And my city went from being relatively small from around, I think maybe 6,000 or 7,000 people. We now have 24,000 people in that community of 1 million in a metro of about 7 million. So we are it's still a relatively medium-sized city, but we are in a greater community. So for me, I have just always been really committed to wherever I feel like I'm planted, I want to be able to give back. And this community gave me so much. I have 4 children and now 3 grandchildren.
No way. You're a grandmother?
I'm a grandmother. I have 3 grandbabies. Yes. Yes, they are the loves of my life. But with my 4 children, they were really young, or some of them weren't even born when we first moved here. And we were so fortunate to have leaders in this city that were very innovative. And they were like, the usual solution isn't the solution for us. Let's figure out how, as this community is evolving, to do change together with the community, to create environments where everybody in the community can thrive. And so I was a beneficiary of that. And there were ways that my young family at the time was able to just serve and give back to the community. But ultimately, what ended up happening is, and I like to share this because I think this is such a powerful example for all of us that are in leadership positions. There were people in our community that just through doing life with these people, they saw potential in me. They saw value in me. They saw my desire to create a community where people can meaningfully connect. And so they invited me into some strategic, I'll call it strategic volunteering opportunities. So at the time, our city, again, this was like fast forward to 2007, the city was building a new city hall and a brand new town center. And the leaders at the time were thinking about public art. And could public art be something that our city could use to help this community be inclusive, to facilitate economic development, placemaking, and really just activate our new town center area. But nobody in our area was doing that. I mean, we're talking Atlanta, Athens, Savannah, some of those cities were doing it, but we weren't seeing that in the suburbs. And so I was invited to serve on a citizen committee. And serving on that committee, it turned into a public arts commission. Serving on that public arts commission really opened my mind and my eyes to really what cities can do using different tools to achieve these things that we want to achieve as communities in order to thrive. And I just really loved it. And I ended up chairing the Public Art Commission and just really enjoyed and fell in love with my city. I said, I went from liking it to loving it. I was like, I love this city. And I love that I was able to use my gifts and awaken things in me. And then what happened is, again, through the power of invitation, I was invited to run for public office. And this was in 2013, actually a couple of years before that. But I said no for 2 years because I was too afraid, Deke. I was really afraid of it seemed like such a big risk. And I definitely didn't want to be a politician. And I absolutely didn't want to see my face or my name on like yard signs or something like that. Like that was terrible. I thought this is going to put my whole family in the spotlight. And I know how people are on Nextdoor, Deke. And they're not nice. And so I was like, I don't know. And then I guess I just kind of had to realize that the types of leaders that I want to lead me are people who do something from a place of love and stewardship, not from a place of advancing a personal agenda or from anger and frustration, but from a place of like, I love it. I want to take care of it. And so if I want those kind of leaders, I need to be that kind of leader. And so I made the decision with my family to run for office, really not expecting to win, but just wanting to show my family this positive example of how we can engage in our community. And I was elected, right? That was in 2013. And ever since then, it has been a journey of learning and growing and continuing to just really try to think about how we make decisions in our community, in our role as public servants, to be able to help our communities and really now through, you mentioned Georgia Municipal Association, through Georgia City Solutions and some of these other opportunities to be able to help all cities in the state of Georgia be able to thrive to the best of their ability.
Well, one thing that I love about municipal elections in Georgia is the fact that they're nonpartisan. So, and I've seen where there have been mayors in other cities and even here too that have affiliated with the party.
Sure.
But I think part of that is you want to go on to another job. But to me, I'm a pragmatist and I'm like, why would I want to really, when I don't have to, do I really want to get close with either political party when I know that will alienate a good many of the people I serve?
Sure. And I feel like as a pragmatist and really just wanting to get outcomes, to seek outcomes. I think what we do sometimes is limit ourselves to the toolkits that each party has, right?
Yep.
Each party has a set of tools. I would prefer to be able to dip into both
Me too.
toolboxes and use what works, as well as use the power of collaboration, which oftentimes is undermined when we attach our identity to something like a political party or a group that has its own agenda, right? So I really love being in this place where we get to serve our community from a nonpartisan perspective, because it allows us to engage. Now, I get it from a practical standpoint. Look, Deke, some of it is fundraising. Like people want to raise money for their campaigns. That's one thing. But people will always say this too. I think, especially when you're successful at something, they will always say, well, what's next? What's your next thing?
Yeah.
And I've been doing this now for 10, 11 years. And I'm like, what do you mean what's next?
Yeah.
I'm doing the work that I think is the most important work as it relates to government, is government closest to the people, with the most accountability to the people, with the most relationships where we live and serve. Why would I want to aspire to do something, quote, higher? Because I don't see it that way.
But let me ask you this, because you do leadership coaching and training leaders and everything. But I've always found in that regard that sometimes it's like people project themselves onto you. Mm-hmm. And if they have ulterior motives, they assume that you do as well. And I'm like, I was the same way here. It's at first, and it's always the vocal minority, right, that are the loudest. But I ran to make money for my family. I did all this, and then, I was just using it as a stepping stone to run for senator, none of which played out to be true. But so my family owns a good bit of property in downtown Augusta. And they're like, well, he's just trying to develop downtown because it puts money in his family's pockets. I'm like, well, that's actually my wife and that's not me. But I'm like, well, as you raise the values for, everybody, but it's just so funny. People and particularly, unfortunately, people don't trust politicians. So I really think at the local level, it puts the onus on you because you're able to develop that trust, because you're looking people in the face. You're seeing them eye to eye. And in 10 years, you're consistent. It's obviously proven that you are truly a public servant and not just a quote unquote typical politician.
Right. And it doesn't stop the accusations from being out there. So whenever there's a political season, this is the other nice thing is, for the most part, and this about municipal elections in the state of Georgia, but we run off political years.
Yeah.
So, unless there's a special election or something, we run up. So we get to kind of tone down some of that rhetoric. But I will say, especially in the last few years, people are just highly, highly suspicious, and, they are highly reactive. And so whenever there's a political season, whether or not there's any basis for truth or not, people are looking to point fingers and to accuse. And I think, oftentimes, and maybe you got this too, people will say to me, I don't know how you do this job, when people will stand up there, they accuse you of lying, they accuse you of benefiting yourself, they accuse you of ruining the city, all these things that people do, whether it's in a council meeting or on Facebook or Nextdoor or whatever. But I really don't look at that as, even if they're using my name, I just don't take it personally, Deke. I just think sometimes that people are frustrated and they want to be heard. They maybe don't have the best way to communicate their frustrations, or they're expecting to get pushback. And I lean in with curiosity. Now, obviously, I want respect. I hope for respectful dialogue, but sometimes that's not in people's capacity, and that is not my problem. I just can only lean in and try to empathize with where they're coming from, try to learn from them, and try to take their feedback to the best of my ability and really think about, okay, what is the greatest good here? What are all of the pieces of information? And what are the people who maybe aren't being so loud, but what do they think, right? And how do we make sure we take that feedback as well, which gets kind of onto another thing about, planning and things that are important for communities too.
What I've found is I exist at the grassroots level. That is where I'm the most comfortable. I've said, whether it was going through chemotherapy, I draw energy being around people, regular people at the grassroots level. But I also found that was an advantage for my 9 years in office, because I think part of leadership is having a presence. Mm-hmm. So I was in low income neighborhoods, not with cameras, but meeting with individuals and families. It wasn't always neighborhood groups. Yeah. So it kind of, when people, they get to know you at the grassroots level, then when somebody says something that is untrue about you, it's like, wait a minute, that guy was, at my house the other day, or that lady was, I talked to her at the grocery store. So I think that grassroots engagement does a wonderful job of humanizing us. Mm-hmm. And, we are all humans. And I think sometimes in politics, in entertainment, people are made to be caricatures. Yeah. But we are all unique individuals.
Yeah. I think you're touching on something that I like to call relational equity. It's, it's really building that through consistency, through, the onus isn't on us solely just to defend ourselves, right? Like if we are building trust and actually building authentic influence, which is really just a trust exchange. Yep. If we're doing that, then those who know us are going to be able, and again, it's not even about us, but they're going to be able to say, no, I know Deke, and I've seen him in these environments, and what you're saying just doesn't ring true with what I know. And, when we are able to build that kind of relational equity or relational capital, it's really powerful, but it takes a while to do that. It takes really, to do it in the authentic way, you have to go beyond sound bites, and you have to really do the work of really serving people really well, meeting them where they are, not always agreeing with everybody. That's not the goal. The goal is to really do a good job of allowing people's voices to be heard, valued, and appreciated. And when we do that, then, so many times that's really nothing more than what somebody wants, is to be heard, valued, and appreciated.
It's interesting. I was having lunch with a group of minister friends the other day, and we were talking about, politics. It's worked its way into churches and everything, but you always have the vocal minority. And I said, I've experienced that. And I said, the problem with some leaders, I won't just say elected officials, is they become so insular that they believe that the vocal minority is prevailing public opinion. And I gave an example. So, gosh, what year was it? One year I was in office. So I joined the Mayors Against Illegal Guns, right? So I'm like, well, who wouldn't be? What mayor wouldn't be against illegal guns? I did not realize that Michael Bloomberg had started it, and it was, a target of guns rights groups. So the Georgia Gun Owners Association, who at that point said they had 20,000 members, put out a hit job statewide saying, we need to tell these however many, anti-gun mayors what we think. So it generated maybe 80 calls and emails to which I responded to every one. And I said, look, man, I'm a lifelong hunter. I'm a gun owner myself. I'm not anti-gun. And so they said, well, nobody told us that. I said, well, of course they didn't. But I also thought, if you've got 20,000 members, you can generate a lot more people, reaching out to me, giving me a piece of their mind for sure. But then 2 weeks later, so my first day in office, we started a prayer breakfast, the mayor's prayer breakfast, non-denominational, houses of worship. 19 years later, it's still going strong. But 2 weeks after I get the hit job by the Georgia Gun Owners, I get a letter in the mail that says, from the Freedom from Religion Foundation, saying you need to cease and desist the mayor's prayer breakfast because you're violating the separation of church and state. So I'm like, okay, all we did was change the name to the community prayer breakfast and just moved on. But we had a planning session, I believe, for our Convention and Visitors Bureau, and we were using a group out of Madison, Wisconsin, which is where the Freedom from Religion Foundation is headquartered. And I was like, hey, man, I've got a little group up in your neck of the woods that's not too happy with me. And he's like, oh, who is that? I said, the Freedom from Religion Foundation. He goes, that group drives me crazy. He said, they've got this picture on their website of this palatial building, and they say that is their world headquarters. He said, that building doesn't exist. It's 5 guys in a strip mall storefront that just are trolling the internet every day to try to find people to sue. So, but, when elected officials listen to the loudest, it's like you're way off base, but grassroots engagement leaves you in a situation where that relational equity, you don't have those blind spots that, that people that exist in silos do, or are always around members of their party and all that. I'm like, that doesn't give you a clear picture of what's going on in your community or in our nation.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I think, at the grassroots, it's really just about building those relationships, right? But I think also there are tools that we can use as city officials. And so that's why oftentimes our strategic and our community planning tools are so important, because we're inviting everybody to say, hey, what's your vision of the future? What do you want your community to look like? And really engaging people. There's so many different ways you can do that effectively. Really engaging people at that community level. There's also like doing for what was done for me, like inviting people in the community, especially if they're passionate about something. Why don't you come volunteer on this committee? Why don't you come serve? Because then what you're going to find is that sometimes, number one, people get a little bit more educated when it's up close. Problems seem easy to solve from a distance. And when we're up close, we realize, oh, wow, there is a lot of nuance. And kind of what you were saying before, too, even with some of these issues of guns rights or freedom of religion or whatever, people want to be binary. It's just a shortcut. Yeah. It really is a shortcut. It prevents us from having to do the hard work of critical thinking, of nuance, of really getting educated on an issue. So, I mean, there's things you can do. There are citizen surveys that are, independent surveys that can go out to your community where you can ask them questions and you can get their feedback. And so we know that while, we definitely have our vocal, folks that are angry about this, and they say we're ruining the city because of apartments or because of traffic or all of these things. We know through our citizen surveys that consistently we rank in the top of the nation, in the top 1% to 10% of the nation in our community trusts us. Our community likes the way the city is planning. Our community, they trust their police officers, right? Like they feel safe. We know these things because we use other tools that make it so. And I have a personal policy where I just choose not to engage on, I am plenty active on social media, but not in those types of engagements. I do not get baited into. I don't care what they're saying on Nextdoor. I don't care what they're saying on Facebook.
I don't even know what Nextdoor is actually.
No, because why am I giving you that voice and that power when, number one, you probably don't live in my city, and number two, I'm not going to let your voice on Nextdoor drown out somebody who showed up to volunteer or to be on a committee or to do a part of the planning process or to show up at a public meeting. Those people that are making an effort to use their voices in their service in the community, I can't let somebody on Nextdoor or Facebook override them just because they're louder.
No. Well, so our mayor, Mayor Garnet Johnson.
Yes.
And I told you about running the Augusta, my first political campaign, the Augusta Stronger Together campaign, and to pass a ballot referendum to get him a vote. So that is what total grassroots engagement, but we used it as an opportunity to educate, engage, and inform. So we have a more informed electorate. We did it through earned media. We did it we did commercials. We did it through grassroots engagement at churches and community groups. We were all over the place, but we passed it with 74% of the vote. It was positive, inclusive, uplifting. But I said, what we did was engage and inform. And what a lot of typical, that type of politician is about enrage and inflame. And I'm like, I would much rather, now we have an engaged, informed, and empowered, I would say, electorate, which they understand. As we pulled back the curtain on the way our government was operating, it didn't matter the group we were in front of. People were appalled. But even for younger voters, I'm like, look, consolidation passed when you were the year you were born. You're 28 and you've had no voice in this government. So all you need to do is get out and vote. They came out. We originally did outreach to the Latino community, which in Augusta, politics has always been perceived to be black and white. It was like, okay, you're including us. We're so excited. During campaign season, nobody comes and campaigns and educates the Latino community. So, it was fun for everybody. And everybody got to take part in a win for our city.
I love that. I love that. There's a couple things I was thinking. Number one, that enrage, the reality is fear is a powerful motivator for people, and it's a way to get movement. But through fear and manipulation, you might get some movement, but you're not going to get alignment. You're not going to get empowerment. You're not going to get opportunity. So it's a short-term strategy that has a whole host of consequences attached to it that far outlast any amount of movement that you can get. That strategy of informing and engaging and empowering is the way the problem is it's your long game. It's the long game. It's not the short-term strategy. And it takes a while, and it takes a lot of time to include people to get them to this place, right? To get people coalescing around something positive, to get them disrupted enough to pause from their everyday life and busyness in order to do something that is positive. And so it's an uphill battle. And then the final thing you touched on, which is super near and dear to my heart, is really focusing on those disenfranchised parts of our community. I am a big believer that until we are all whole, none of us are whole. None of us are going to thrive and be healthy until all of us are healthy and thriving. I just had an opportunity, and this is through my business, but to do some work for another city where we did these community connections workshops, where we came along and helped the community at large be able to bring people into the room to have discussions around connection, understanding, respect, and empathy. And I'll tell you, some of the coolest things is we actually had a friend of mine runs a nonprofit where he literally works with the marginalized populations, those who have been incarcerated, homeless, mental health, addiction. Those are his clients. He brought to the first one, he brought 35 of them, and they sat at tables with executives, with educators, with pastors, with faith-based leaders. They sat at these same tables, and we had equitable and inclusive conversations that were empowering, and everybody learned. I remember an educator came up to me and he was like, I am so grateful that I had, so-and-so at my table, because his lived experiences have been so different than mine. And I learned so much from him. And we had the same thing with those other populations where decisions are made by leaders like us, Deke, that affect those people in marginalized communities. And we're doing it to them instead of with them. And how do we get there and do it with them and really bring people to the table so that we're all learning from each other?
No, completely. So I did a TED Talk a number of years ago, cities where all things connect. And I said, we need to view cities as organisms. And if one part of the organism, if your heart is not healthy, it impacts your overall health. We're all interconnected. So if you've got, neighborhoods that are crime infested, it's a drain on law enforcement. So I don't care if you live in the nicest neighborhood, to allow that to continue, it's impacting you. So we just need to see that. And I get so excited in spite of what we see at the national level when I see people like you that are doing this for the right reasons. It's a good, and that's what I want my listeners and viewers to know, that there are good people out there that are doing this to truly serve you and to improve your communities. But I agree with you. I mean, we are all in this together, and everybody should have a seat at the table.
I love the name of your podcast, Changemakers, because I am a highly pragmatic person, but I am an undying and unapologetic optimist. I really believe that we can affect change, and that particularly as it relates to government, it has to start. It has to start at home. It has to start in our communities. And the healthier that we get in our communities, the ripple effect is a bunch of healthy communities. What do they make up? A healthy state. What does a healthy and thriving state make up? A healthy and thriving nation.
Oh, yeah.
So we've got to do this work from the inside out. And I think when we do it that way, we're going to start seeing transformation and fixing of some of those problems that we're seeing in our federal and even state government. Some of that we won't have a tolerance for it anymore because we're getting way too healthy to settle for that.
No, and you'll appreciate this, Linnea. So, and we've talked about it. So in participating in 4 campaigns in Augusta, local campaigns, nonpartisan campaigns. So 3 with me as the candidate, I won with an average of 62% of the vote. And so the first one I've run, we won that one 74%. That is 4 separate campaigns in 19 years and nearly 2 decades that have been won doing it differently, bringing people together on common ground with an average. Those campaigns average winning with 64.75% of the vote. And I tell people, I'm like, that is not a statistical anomaly. And my goal now is to basically, although there are a lot of campaign consultants that will tell you, you've got to say all the bad things about your opponent. But as you say, in doing the first 3 that way during 9 years in office, I think that played a large part in the last one because, Garnett's doing a great job as mayor, but people trusted me because I'd always done it that way. So that played a role long-term in getting 74% of the vote. But if we could do it here, we can do it in other cities. And it is more difficult, but I'm like, shortcuts are never going to lead to anything good in life. Sure. I don't think.
And at the end of the day, I think, again, we have to check ourselves as leaders. I was fortunate to also win with 74% of the vote. But as leaders, we need to check ourselves because if I run, I'll be up for reelection next year, and I will never take it for granted that I'm going to win any sort of election. And if I don't, and I'm doing things, I just won't compromise my values. And so if I don't, and I have run this campaign with integrity and with the value system and doing it in the way that I think is positive, empowering, and uplifting, then I'm not going to be sad that I may be disappointed for a little bit when you work hard at something, but I won't be. It's not who somebody else is going to take that mantle. And here's the sad truth. The sad truth is we also learn as communities through pain. And so sometimes we have to make poor decisions in order to see the consequences of it and get that pendulum moving back in the right direction. Well, none of us want that. It's like being a parent. You don't want your kids to learn through pain. You want them to learn because as a parent, you're like, if you just follow the way of wisdom, you'll avoid, right? And, but human nature oftentimes is no, I'd rather take this path. And when we do, we get what we ask for. And sometimes that's not what we need. Well,
it's funny because, I'm so glad, I guess going through cancer has just made me so introspective. And I think it has made me a much better person. Mm-hmm. But I'm like, we think, when I was in my 30s, I was working with a land trust, making $30,000 a year, and a local real estate firm offered me a job to head up their development division and making $200,000 a year. Oh, wow. And at first, I turned them down. But I'm like, Lord, thank you for giving me the ability and the wherewithal and the resources at that point in time to make a decision like that. Because had I done that, I probably never would have been mayor. I never would have done all this. But to me, I think we as leaders, and people just give a pass to politicians. I don't. I'm like, we should show good character, and so I've had a young man recently on the podcast. His name is Charles Knox, 26-year-old Methodist youth pastor who is way wise beyond his years, where our families are related by marriage. But he said something really wise. He said, when we start valuing policy over character, that's a dangerous position to be in. And for a 26-year-old to say that, but I'm going to go ahead and say this, and I want to get your take. And I am politically agnostic, but I thought about that in the days after that. So certain politicians, people say, well, I like their policies better because I had more money in my pocket. And so it's like, so you're saying, if you have one politician that you perceive to create more money for you, you're willing to look the other way on any character flaws. And I'm like, that is, but do we just prize win at all costs? And I mean, but we need elected.
And then are we really winning, Deke?
Oh,
are
yeah.
we really winning?
No.
And we're not.
No.
That's the problem. We're not winning. No one, it's a zero-sum game.
No.
So no one's winning. I mean, you probably have had this also. We get this all the time is people in both political parties will ask for endorsements, right? I'll always have a conversation and sit down with somebody and have a conversation with them. But what I'm less interested in is what is your policy on this, or what is your position on this? Number one, especially if they've never been in office before, you don't know I don't know what I don't know. Before I served in office, if you would have asked me what my position was on stormwater or on transport, I don't know. I haven't done it before. I've got to learn, right? What I'm really curious about when I sit down with folks, it doesn't matter which side of the aisle they're on. I will ask them, tell me how you solve problems. Tell me how you build consensus.
Yep.
Tell me what you do when somebody is critical of an idea or a position that you have. Help me understand how and why you make decisions and what it looks like in your behaviors. And I'll tell you whether or not I'm going to support you as a leader, because in most parts of our government, including the federal government, there are enough checks and balances for policy to sort itself out. There are swings that can be painful, but there are a lot of checks and balances, and policy is fluid. We can fix things with policy. Character, on the other hand, is something I think that we need to choose to the best of our ability to be focused on as it relates to choosing the leaders. It goes back to what I said in the beginning. What kind of leaders do I want? I want leaders that lead from a place of that character of being for the greatest and highest good of everyone, and of just loving and wanting to steward their role.
Preach, Linnea. But so we have a
sorry, I did my little
no. I'm loving it. But so we have a Tuesday healing service at our church, and so we had one of our priests. I'm Episcopal. She's a dear friend of ours, but she got up today and she was talking about she always gets depressed this time of year because her older brother died when he was a third-year law student at Virginia. Around this season, her husband passed around this season, but she was saying, if we believe in Jesus, we need to show that we need to be changed and all this and talking about, but she started crying. And when she sat down, I was like, buddy, that was an amazing sermon. But another priest got up and said, there are different styles of preaching. Some want to be very academic, but there's also authentic. And what does that mean? That means that you're coming from the heart. So that's the leadership I want to see, as you say, compassionate, driven by the heart, not by, I want to swear fealty to these political principles, in order to be a part of the group. So I've told you, I went on the advisory board for the Forward Party. So we're endorsing Democrats and Republicans, but it's basically based on principles. You have to sign an agreement to maintain your character and integrity, to treat everybody with dignity and respect. And I'm like, that's a good start. But we had our comms committee last Friday, and somebody said, oh, we're getting blowback on Facebook or whatever that we don't stand for anything because we're endorsing both parties. I said, take that out of the realm of social media. Every single person I talk to gets it. And they're like, so you're requiring candidates to actually, there's some accountability that you're going to say, we will uphold these principles. I think that's a great place to start.
I think it's a great place to start. I do think it's a great place to start. Again, we should care about how our leaders are making decisions, not necessarily, it's not that we don't care about the decisions they're making, but at the end of the day, almost every single elected person is only one vote. And so how do we do at, again, building consensus, building collaboration, working with partners bipartisanly, bilaterally across the aisle, and really just thinking about what are we doing we represent everyone. I represent the people who didn't vote for me, the people who did.
Yeah.
I represent the people who don't get to vote, maybe because they're a business owner and they're not a resident in my city. They don't get to vote, but they're investors. Like, I represent the people who maybe have a history of incarceration, but they maybe don't have the privilege to vote right now. I still if they're in my community,
Yep.
I represent them. And I have to think about that as it relates to my responsibility, the stewardship that I want to bring to this role. And again, it's a set of tools. It's a role. It's temporary. It is not a summative of who I am nor my identity. But as long as I have this role, I just really want to steward it well for as long as it is.
No, and I wrote a piece for GMA years and years ago where I said that. I said, look, I serve a city of 200,000 people. Some of the people who did vote for me. Some didn't. Some did not vote at all. But I should value all of their needs equally and try to serve them all equally. And I mean, that's so refreshing to hear you say that, because that's the way I think elected officials ought to look at it. So as I say, I'm naive. When I was a public servant, I thought I'm there to serve the public, not a party or not a special interest group. The public that's just what we're supposed to do. But it seems like, particularly at the national level, politics has gotten so far away from that. But I think to get back to that point, it has to start at the local level with people like you modeling that behavior for the generations behind us.
And bringing people along with us, just like we talked about. This next generation, right? Like bringing those people bringing them along and providing opportunities, inviting people into places where their contributions can awaken something in them that then looks a whole lot like leadership for our communities.
It's interesting. I told this story in my book. So The Changemaker, The Art of Building Better Leaders, shameless plug. It's still out there on Amazon. But so my wife and I had a party for a fundraiser that I was sharing. This is after office. But we invited, our local commission and everything. And one gentleman I'd known for years said, we usually get rubber chicken on a paper plate, but your wife is serving off the fine china. I said, you know what? Doesn't matter who we have here. I mean, it does not matter at all. She feels like she ought to serve everybody off the fine china. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I love that. It's not saying, well, only this group of people should get the really nice stuff. It's like everybody should get the nice stuff.
Mm. And I love inviting people into our homes. We don't do it as much as we used to. And I think there's just some really great ways that, especially if we think about it through the lens of being inclusive, like not just inviting people in our homes that think like us, that have our same shared lived experiences, live in our neighborhoods. But what about inviting people into our homes that have had different backgrounds, different lived experiences, different perspectives, inviting them into our homes, creating safe places where they are cared for, but we can also have dialogue. We can shape and refine each other. We can help each other expand.
No, and that's funny. So my wife, people will say, you have so many nice things in your house. You have I mean, her mother collected china and silver and everything. She's like, they were like, aren't you worried of somebody taking something? She said, if anybody ever did, and we're not aware of anybody ever doing that, that's on them. That's not on me. And I think that's a great way to look at it. She's a very good lady for sure.
She's a very wise woman. It sounds like she's got a great perspective.
She is. Well, as we get down towards the end, I do want to do a little plug for your business so you can tell our listeners and viewers what you do.
So my company, Long Table, our goal is to really unlock the potential in people. When we really see people as individuals or as teams or in their organizations, our goal is to help them be able to realize that value that they have and be able to help them to be empowered, which requires lending of that strength, right, to empower somebody so that they can step into new opportunities that will help them to have healthier cultures, as well as be able to perform in ways that are effective. And so we're able to work with organizations from nonprofits to Fortune 500 companies to governments to communities. I mean, it's just, we work across the board wherever people are. We get to meet them, our teams, and get to meet them through either executive or management performance coaching. That's kind of that one-on-one. We do a lot of work with teams, and whether they're internal teams, matrix teams, external teams that we're pulling together. And then we do a lot of work in environments where is more of your public speaking, right? Like your kind of seminars or workshops or conferences and that type of work as well. We do a lot of inclusive leadership work. So how do we give people tools to know how to show up in different dimensions of diversity that we all bring, but having a common language, having tools that we know how to use so that we can engage in healthier, more effective ways. So that's what I do. My company, you can find out more on longtableconsulting.com. And I'm sure you're going to probably include my contact information. My cell phone number, I always love to give it out because I love having people call me, but it's 678-592-4150. So if anybody has a question and they want to call me, whether it's about leadership in the public realm or in the boardrooms or on a factory floor or just, just that human together stuff, I would love to have that conversation and always open to connecting with folks.
I thought I was like the only crazy person who would put out their real cell phone number to national and international audiences, but so if you need a hired gun, or if we can collaborate on any of this, please call me. I would love to do it. Yeah. So my two last questions are, where do people find you? I think you've pretty much covered that one. But on a daily basis, what brings joy to your heart and puts a smile on your face?
Oh, man. I think just really connecting people to people and people to their place is really important. I think there's something really powerful about that. And when I am able to see that happen, again, whether it's in the public realm, whether it's restoration and reparations for families, for organizations, when we can start to see that work happen and we can see people be able to thrive and be human together really well, that just gives me so much encouragement, and it just makes me want to do more. Right. So,
well, you know, it's funny. So I was talking to a friend of mine in Europe, and I said, I figured out that I'm not a motivational leader. I'm an inspirational leader or speaker. He goes, that's because motivation lights a fire under you and inspiration lights a fire inside of you. Oh. So every day I thank the Lord. I'm like, thank you for the fire that you've lit inside of me, and please use it to provide a beacon of hope in dark times and to provide warmth and light for your people. Thank you for the divine spark that you put inside of me. Use that divine spark to light those fires in other people, to give them passion for building your kingdom on earth and for serving you through serving others. And thank you for the living water that's running through my veins. And I pray that it would overflow out of me and bless your people. So, you know, fire, the divine spark, and water, all of those things overflow out to bless others and to glorify you.
I love that. And I think it's so important for us to anchor ourselves, you have such a powerful anchor in your faith, as do I. And oftentimes it's so easy to see the chaos that's happening in the world and to lose our peace and to lose our purpose. And I think when we anchor ourselves to our faith or whatever it is that anchors somebody and helps us to tell the truth to ourselves about ourselves,
yeah,
we can actually, that is one thing we can control, is our personal peace. And when we control our personal peace, we become peacemakers.
Yep.
And then we can live at peace with others in our communities and in our world. And we do not have to be discouraged. We get to be hope bearers in this world because we could be people of peace.
And that's what I tell people. I'm like, if you're waiting for the government to come fix your problems, you're going to be waiting a long time. But if we all just do a little more, and it's not somebody else's responsibility to fix us, we have to be part of the process. And that's best done when we can join together across all lines of difference and really make the world a better place. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for living that and modeling that.
Deke, I really believe this is just the beginning of opportunities that we are going to discover where we can continue to be those change makers together and invite other people along and really be able to be those peacemakers and hope bearers.
I totally agree. Well, Linnea, thank you for being an amazing guest.
Thank you. Thank you so very much for having me.
Absolutely. That's all the time we've got. Dropping the mic and we are out.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to or watching the Changemaker podcast today. Greatly appreciate it. If you're listening and you want to see the video, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel at Deke Copenhaver. That's a pretty easy to remember, I would think. But really, we also want to remind you to like, subscribe, rate across all platforms, download. And if you're looking for a coach, a speaker, or anything, you know where to find me. Just email me at me@dekecopenhaver.com. And thanks so much for listening.